Zachary Ramsey arrives in Great Falls. The teaching staff welcomed 10-year-old Zach to Whittier Elementary, where he quickly settled into school life.
Just a really friendly, lovable, always smiling, just this great big smile all the time.
Every day, Zach takes this alley to and from school. On February 6, 1996, he walks down it as usual.
Zach headed down the alley with his backpack, and within 10 minutes, he was off the face of the earth. He just disappeared at the corner of 5th and 5th, and there was just nothing to go on.
Well, at first, you know, it's typical for a principal to think somebody's playing hooky, as we call it here. And so then we pursued that, and they said, no, nobody else is absent. Then we became more and more concerned.
Suspicion quickly turns towards a notorious sex offender who occasionally works at this apartment building, right on Zach's usual school route. A 39-year-old man calling himself Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Barjona.
Barjona was born David Brown, and he was born in Massachusetts. He actually started engaging in assaulting younger children when he was 10 years old. In 1977, he was casing a movie theater, and he was looking for a couple boys to kill. And he had a police jacket on, a police badge, a toy gun, handcuffs. They were real handcuffs. He pulled up beside the boys after they left the movie theater and told them that he was a police officer undercover. They needed to come with him.
He takes the boys to a secluded country lane where he brutally assaults them both.
He thought he had killed one of the boys. He thought he had strangled him to death and left him along the side of the road.
Luckily, both boys survived the attack, and a Massachusetts court convicts David Brown of attempted murder. After 2 years in prison, he is transferred to a psychiatric treatment center.
Virtually every evaluation that he had, the evaluators declared him a sexually dangerous person and said that under no circumstances should he really ever be released from prison.
In 1984, during his confinement at the facility, Brown decides he has become a soldier of God, so he makes up an Old Testament name to match his new identity. David Brown becomes Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Barjona.
Then, in 1990, Barjona's family hired 2 Christian psychologists, and those Christian psychologists basically said that Barjona had been saved and he was very unlikely to reoffend, and Barjona was in fact released.
In 1996, when Zach Ramsey vanishes from the alley, Barjona is high on the list of suspects.
A witness placed Mr. Barjona in the alley. We had a different witness who was able to place his car in the area that morning that Zachary Ramsey was missing.
Despite the witness sightings and Barjona's notorious history, police cannot connect him to Zach. In fact, with no sign of the boy, dead or alive, there is no proof a crime has even taken place. But as the months pass, most people begin to fear the worst.
There was a time at which we were wondering whether we had gone from searching for a missing student to a recovery of a body.
Zach's mother, Rachel, resolutely refuses to accept he is dead and continues to appeal for a safe return.
Whoever, if somebody does have my son, is a good boy. And please be kind with him. Treat him fairly. And bring him back. Bring him back.
Although her pleas remain unanswered, Rachel is undaunted. But while she keeps the search alive, the rest of the community tries to find closure.
We made a garden, and we had forget-me-nots put in there and a plaque.
It read, "Lost but not forgotten." We wanted to be very, very careful not to make it sound like Zach was never coming back.
The case goes cold for 3 years until police get an unexpected break outside another elementary school. Detective John Cameron is on the scene.
I was working day shift that day, and one of the detectives was on his way to work and had just spotted Nathan Barjona dressed like a policeman.
Three years after the disappearance of Zach Ramsey, police find known pedophile Nathaniel Barjona dressed as a police officer outside an elementary school.
He had a badge, a stun gun, a fake gun, pepper spray, a police uniform. I mean, everything to basically kidnap a young boy. And his apartment was about 3 blocks away.
It's a heart-stopping discovery. A possible child abduction has been narrowly averted. Police detain Barjona on the minor charge of impersonating a police officer and obtain a search warrant. They then turn their attention to the small apartment where he is now living to try and determine if their fears about him are true. When police enter Barjona's apartment, they cross the threshold into a bewildering world.
There was approximately 22,000 photographs of children. Some of them were cut out from magazines, some of them were actual photographs. Many of them were actually cut out photographs from school yearbooks of children in Great Falls.
We ended up taking 55 boxes of items that we then took to the police station and spent 3 months analyzing.
Detectives are faced with the sickening possibility that Barjona has abused an untold number of local children. They start to carefully examine and catalog hundreds of thousands of items. In early 2000, they find a piece of paper that finally connects Barjona to the disappearance of Zachary Ramsey.
He had a list that not only had the names of the victims that we were aware of that lived in Massachusetts, but Zach Ramsey was on that list, as well as several kids who lived in Great Falls. So we went upon trying to find out who are these young men who are on this list.
They know the identities of these boys is hidden somewhere in the boxes of still unexamined evidence.
About 9 months into the investigation, while I was searching evidence, I found a canister of film. And I went and had it developed. And on there was Nathan Barjona taking pictures of his penis in different states of erection. And also on there were some boys. And I knew them and knew where they lived, so I just went right to their house as soon as I found those pictures.
The boys were aged 5, 9, and 13. They lived directly above Nathaniel Barjona.
These were 3 young men who didn't have a lot going for themselves, and Mr. Barjona simply befriended them. And within a few months, he was taking them out to eat dinner all over the place. He was taking them to movies. They were at his house almost on a daily routine.
They looked to Nathan as their father, but he was continually abusing them. And they were so embarrassed to tell me what he had been doing that it took about 2 hours of interviewing before the one boy, the oldest, broke down in the most horrible breakdown I've ever seen and started telling us the truth.
He explains that Barjona has a pulley on his ceiling from which he hanged the boys while sexually abusing them. The discovery of this pulley and the rope is grim confirmation of the story.
Finding this information was the biggest break in the whole case because we had Nathan arrested for impersonating an officer that wasn't a very good charge and would probably carry a year if you did it. We needed something more, and having these 3 victims come forward with crimes that can put him away for life and solid evidence because they were also on the list that he had made that Zach Ramsey was on. So it all tied it together.
On July 5th, 2000, Barjona is charged with sexually assaulting the 3 boys. But Detective Cameron continues to scour the evidence, obsessed with learning the truth about Zachary Ramsey. What he discovers is almost beyond comprehension.
It went from something bad's happened to something horrific, evil has happened.
In July 2000, Nathaniel Barjona is officially charged with sexually assaulting 3 local boys. But detectives are still looking for evidence that will tie Barjona to the disappearance of Zach Ramsey 3 years earlier.
They found a whole series of coded writings that Barjona had made, and they looked like just random letters, just in small blocks. No one could really make sense of what it was. And they were trying to figure out what Barjona had done with Zach Ramsey.
And it took us about 6 months to decode them.
John Cameron looked down at the coded writings, and he saw something that began to emerge from those coded writings. And at that point, John Cameron actually screamed, "My God, he ate him." And that's when they first realized that it was very likely that Barjona had cannibalized, not only killed, but cannibalized Zach Ramsey.
When news of Cameron's discovery begins to circulate, those who know Zach are left reeling.
It went from something bad's happened to something horrific, evil has happened. It was that level.
Now, more determined than ever to find hard evidence, Detective Cameron carefully pieces together the movements of Barjona and his family during 1996. He discovers that both his mother and brother were out of town at a funeral.
On February 6th, Nathan Barjona was home alone. So he had the time to do whatever he wanted to do, and he decided while Mom was gone, he was going to do his ultimate fantasy.
Cameron also learns that Barjona had exclusive access to a garage behind the family home, so he gets a warrant to search it.
We spent about 3 weeks there. We actually brought in a bobcat. We sifted every bit of dirt out of that.
We dug, and we did find some bones. I think we found altogether maybe 26 bones.
And it was wrapped up in his stationery, a stationery that said Nathan Barjona on it, and we thought for sure we had the answer. We found little pieces of the bone off from where we thought that Nathan had cut up Zach.
An examination confirms the bones are human, from an adolescent about Zach's age.
So we gathered all this and sent it to the lab, and then the DNA came back, not Zach. And to this day, we have no idea who that bone is.
It's a crushing blow for Cameron. But to Zach's mother, Rachel, it confirms what she has always believed, that Zach is still alive, and one day he will come home.
Apparently God thinks that we're pretty strong people and that we can handle this. And there's going to be good. I know there's going to be good. I just don't know when.
I can't count on one hand the times I saw her break down and cry. She was very strong, very proud, and truly believed that he was still out there. And I don't think she wanted him to ever see her upset.
As there is still no conclusive evidence that Zach was murdered, prosecutor Brant Light puts the case on hold. Instead, he pursues the charges he has already filed against Barjona.
I wanted to try the sexual assault case first. I thought it was really important to get that conviction because obviously the murder case was a case without a body, very, very difficult.
Because of the high emotion surrounding the Zach Ramsey case in Great Falls, Barjona's trial is moved 150 miles away to Butte, Montana. It begins on February 20th, 2002.
I'll never forget our 13-year-old taking the stand and telling the story, and he got to the one point where he actually had to talk about Mr. Barjona touching his private parts. So he took the stand and we got to that point, and he just stopped. And it seemed to me like it was forever, but it was probably only about 30 seconds. But I got closer to him. I said, okay, everything's going to be okay. Where did he touch you? And his eyes swelled up with tears, and he finally turned at me and said the word penis. And I looked over at the jury, and I was choking up, and I saw that some of the jurors were choking up, and it was a turning point in the trial, I believe.
On February 25th, the jury retires to consider its verdict. In the case of the 5-year-old, Barjona is found not guilty. On the 9-year-old, the jury is deadlocked. In the case of the 13-year-old, Barjona is found guilty of sexual assault.
He was basically sentenced to 130 years, ineligible for parole, so basically he was given a life sentence.
Barjona's fate is finally sealed, but Zach Ramsey's remains a mystery. In the summer of 2002, Light prepares to try Barjona for Zach's homicide. It will be the hardest case of his life.
Jurors, they watch TV and you know, they expect you to come in with all this scientific evidence, and when you don't have a body, you don't have a cause of death.
At first, Rachel Howard is not supportive. She wants to keep the search for her son alive.
There's been enough negativism that has happened. Let's stop it now, and let's move forward and give love. If we do that, then things will be okay.
Cameron and Light believe Zach is dead, but before convincing a jury, they must convince Rachel.
We were all in the office pumping up for this big trial, and all of a sudden one of the county attorneys walks in and says, "Hey, I just saw Rachel with the 2 defense attorneys at dinner."
In the days leading to Nathaniel Barjona's murder trial, prosecutors present their case to Rachel Howard, the victim's mother. They ask if she will testify that Zach is not alive, and setting her dearest hopes aside, she agrees.
I remember I ran into Rachel, and it was a weekend, and she just gave me a big hug and thanked me for working so hard, and I said, that's okay. We'd been interviewing her and getting her ready for trial.
But in truth, the bulk of the case is no more than a theory about how and why Barjona did an unspeakable thing to a 10-year-old boy.
He had the house and the garage to himself, and so he set into motion this plan to kidnap Zach, torture him, cut him up, and then feed him to people he despised at his church. And he photographed those dinners.
Thursday, September 27th, with the trial just 1 week away, prosecutors and police are making final preparations in an evening meeting when they learn some incredible news.
We were all in the office pumping up for this big trial, and all of a sudden one of the county attorneys walks in and says, "Hey, I just saw Rachel with the 2 defense attorneys at dinner."
So we actually had a meeting with her the next day scheduled. So we brought it out that, hey, we saw you last night, meeting with defense counsel, what's going on? And she just blew up at us.
It was then that we learned that they had taken her out to dinner, had been grooming her testimony, and she was the first witness to get up on the stand, and her testimony was going to be that her son is still alive. And at that point, you have reasonable doubt right there, and so you have no case.
Rachel claims she never wanted to testify, but police threatened to arrest her if she didn't. Detectives Cameron and Light deny ever making such a threat.
It was very upsetting. I remember giving an interview to KRTV, and I wished I hadn't, because I said things on there that I was furious. And it was all pointed at her. I remember it.
I already had life without parole. I wasn't about to cost the taxpayers another $500,000 when I had a mother of the victim who didn't want to cooperate.
Barjona was never prosecuted for the murder of Zachary Ramsey.
We always tried to continue to get him to give up the body, but he never would. You know, give us something so we can get some closure. But he's the type of guy that would just love to hold that power over the cops, especially, and go to his grave like that, and he did.
On April 13th, 2008, Barjona is found dead in his cell of a heart attack. Zachary Ramsey has never been found. It will never be known for certain what happened on February 6, 1996. The entire saga still deeply affects Great Falls to this day.
We always felt that this was a safe community. You know, you took care of your kids and you were careful with them, but yet, you know, predators live other places. They don't live in Great Falls, Montana, but they do.
Rachel's denial and her own grief about her son vanishing without a trace has been absolutely devastating for her. She devoutly believes that Zach is alive.